looks like it's 5-coated or something. But just wanted to share this because it just kind of shows like the different possibilities that you could do with this kind of new input interface. Any questions, any thoughts on this? Is it dumb? Does it make sense? Would you use this? Cool. Christopher, what do you think?
It's cool. It looks normie friendly. Nice.
The other one I wanted to share was this one here. So this one got shared in builders from me. This is happening in Nigeria. So Brianna, who runs Eventu, she just started doing this thing with the HRF, where they're trying to do these hackathons for women, which turns out actually you get a better turnout if it's just for women who actually want to build, but they feel, I guess it's a better environment for them. So there's a lot of really cool prizes. A lot of them won some stuff. Yeah, you can see all the stuff here. Team Lightning won the big prize, and it kind of goes in from here. So just a lot of building that's happening in the Bitcoin space. Just wanted to share that. The other one is this one that got shared. This guy was looking for feedback on his website. I don't know what you guys think about that, but this was the website that he shared. Looked pretty interesting. And then this is another project called Plunda. So this is one that's doing something really interesting where they're like selling, I guess, coins, like real life coins, and they're using the Bitcoin network and the Lightning network to sell and exchange these coins. But what's kind of interesting now is now they're releasing bonds. It's almost kind of turned into a different sort of gaming thing of a sort, and you can see there. I feel like he's going to stumble onto some sort of like fractional reserve banking at some point. But you can see his wallet, and he has the bonds, and it's all done over Lightning. So I'm going to share that one too. And then the other one is Zotobox. So this one got released too. This is from a kid that I met probably about 2 months ago. He was just building this kind of platform where it's basically Zaprite, it looks like. The only difference is that it's all in Latin America, and you can use anything cash, Bitcoin, any sort of currency, and it allows anybody to spin up their own kind of a POS system right out of the box. And then he has this really cool thing where he's doing like plugins and stuff. So I thought this was a really cool project. But this guy is like really young. He's only like 21, 22, but he's definitely building something that's he's passionate about. And then the last one was this one, a proposal for improving Wallet of Satoshi. I don't know if you guys have taken a look at this, or even who has heard of Wallet of Satoshi? Oh, okay. So not that many people. It's basically a Lightning wallet. But apparently there's some sort of like bad flow to it or something, Austin. Do you know what he's trying to do? To me it seems fine, but he made a proposal inside the builder's territory, and he posted it here in his GitHub. So if anybody's looking at, interested in seeing like what that looks like, definitely share here. And with that, I'll open it up to the room if anybody has a hack and tell project they want to share. Christopher? Yeah? Okay.
Can I do a web page thing?
Yeah, go for it.
Hey folks, if you saw my talk a couple months ago, I said that the little mobile app I showed off, I was going to then connect it to top coding agents, Claude Code and Codex. Did that. Going to launch this in the next week or so. Let me show you this first. Right now only for iOS. If you go to openagents.com and you click join the test flight, you can try the like proof of concept version, but the idea is these coding agents, a lot of people like me and Eddie and Also, what are you using these days? Cloud Code?
Actually, Codex.
I converted also to Codex. But then there's stuff that Cloud Code's better at. It's like, just give me one app that I can use both of these. I don't have to care, whatever the new one is, and give me it as a mobile app. I don't know if you guys have this feeling that I do, but like the opportunity cost when I don't have the agents running is so high, like I need to have it running all the time. I personally experienced the single greatest daily increase in my own personal productivity as a developer just when I was able to have this mobile app let me command my desktop-based coding agents from my mobile app, walking around my house. So we're kind of doing a full-on release of the nice new version of this next week or so. So stay tuned to our Twitter, Open Agents. And man, Cloud Code and Codex, these janky terminal UIs. There's no reason you need to be in the terminal. There's nothing in the terminal that you can't also do in a desktop app. This is just an example of it kind of like syncing from the desktop app to a web app. Someone wanted a web UI, so basically cross-platform, easy to use, mobile, web, desktop, all the same chats commanding your desktop app. And then we've got all sorts of cool, crazy stuff we're going to add into it, like a Bitcoin wallet, reboot our agent marketplace, et cetera, et cetera. So stay tuned to Open Agents. If you use Cloud Code or anything, please see me, and let's get you on the beta sign-up list. That's it, thanks.
Something you want to show? Yeah, go for it. Yeah. Actually, it should just be on AirPlay. If you just connect to, yeah. Anybody else ready to show something? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, howdy, super fast. But okay, thank you all for coming. Nah, I'm kidding. Like so.
Give us a TED talk.
I can also crack a joke if you want.
What's your joke?
I'm so horrible. So I've been working on this. It's a little stupid how it started, but there's a lot of like meetups happening in Austin. Like literally, like yesterday, I wage scraped like 80 URLs, like that I actually kind of like, okay, they are approved by me. But what I'm doing is basically like wage scraping and aggregating and putting everything on a rack system. Eventually, this is gonna be able also on ChatGPT. You can just connect it. But the main thing is you can get like, hey, tell me which events are like for students or for like professional hackathons, etc. And even like it started like I wanted to know like if I'm gonna go into an event, does he have like free food or free drinks? It's so stupid. But the main one, as I'm gonna start like fundraising eventually for the AI that I'm building, I wanted to know like which one is for investors. So with that said, I'm trying to build the best way to find events, starting with tech and eventually for other industries. Like for example, one of them is sports. If you are into running clubs, it's impossible to find running clubs. It's unbelievable because all of them are like Instagram and stuff like that, and search is just horrible. So if you, yeah, that's it. Pretty cool. Give it a follow. Hubble.events. Is he ready?
Okay. Well, next month, you can always do it next month. Go for it.
So I'll try and make this pretty quick too. I've been working on something mostly for education. I like building things to help make things easy to understand. And one thing about Bitcoin that I think is pretty cool is it's all based on digital signatures. So let me show you this site that I put together to easily explain it. Called Verified Bitcoin Message. If you got a hardware wallet, you can use that to sign any message. If you're unfamiliar with it, the site just explains what it is. A digital signature, let me see. Digital signature is just a bit of cryptography that is tamper resistant. And you can see here is an example of a message that was signed by this address. And if you try and modify it even just a little bit, it will not verify. So I think that this has some pretty cool capabilities. This will be used to secure the internet, and Bitcoin is secured the same way too. So if you want to learn more about it, you can learn about it here.
That was great, y'all. Anybody else want to share anything? All right, let's eat real quick, and then we will get set up with Zach, like in 15 minutes.
Just lost connection, but I think I might. I don't think my screen turned off. So let me ask you this. And I was kind of like, okay, that's fair. I wonder what kind of proxies were like, because maybe something else I have run on my network, right? Because I kind of went into it blind. I was like, I have no idea how this works. I'm just going to install it. That version. Background information. So that makes sense. I've had two hassles. One was like trying to get like desktop mobile sync working with like purely local hardware. I was like, you know what? In the short term, I'm going to use there's a awesome cloud database called Convex. It's basically using web options and web but makes multi-device sync super easy. So my objective is in the short term is like us or standard convex, but convex URL. Basically just building around the two. Because that allows us instead of even worrying about on-device sync, it's just your desktop is always going to write convex, and then regardless of what the mobile is doing, it doesn't matter. It's always just going to sync down the proper thing. So I'm starting that, and I know that like I don't know how I would use that. These self yeah, all our open source. No, like content. You can sell those content. Okay. And so that's what I'm saying. Like, we're gonna make it. That's fair. Like it's a little bit specific because it's like I'm using this maybe as marketing niche technology, but you can host it yourself if you want to trust me, or I'll host it for you. And then like we want people to like be able to click a button easily, like suppose well, whatever it is. And like it is possible to have desktop running and then just be mobile with like other like stuff here around. easy to find a bug, and then it will do it for like listening experience. It's like, and maybe even it will find a bug, and maybe right then I'll open my first PR. It's like that was the thing there. So that's the other thing. Your environment, you have the conversation, right? You have the team. So you can say, what was the user last workday? Like find a bug, find a mistake in the docs,
let's go ahead and get started. Feel free to grab some more food if you're hungry through the talk. But go ahead and get your seats and your drinks. All right, Zach, you ready? Yeah, go for it. So, who in the room is a founder? Would be curious to find out. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Only 5 founders in the room? Okay. 6 founders in the room. Okay, cool. So you came to the right meetup tonight because we have somebody who is working in the venture capital ecosystem in Austin at Trammell, and yeah, let's just give it up for Zach one more time. Thank you for coming, Zach.
Of course. Thank you guys for coming.
Last time we had trouble with the audio. Yeah, with all that being said, let's just jump into it.
Yeah. Well,
Zach,
Car, what I
go
want
for
to
it.
say first, I'm really excited to be here because I remember when I was a student, I was at UCLA. I grew up here in Austin, and I was so passionate about Bitcoin. I was really wanting to get involved, to meet everybody, kind of in the space here in Austin, and I came to the Austin Bitcoin Club.
Did you really?
Yeah, 2021. It was
Really?
in this room.
Oh, in the bull run.
Yep, exactly.
Oh, you remember
Full
that.
market energy.
Yeah.
And yeah, you were hosting, got introduced to a lot of people here, so
Yeah,
it's
dude.
full circle
Did I
moment
meet you
for
at
me.
that time?
Yeah, for sure.
Was I nice to you?
You were. You
Okay,
were.
great.
You were very gracious with your time.
You never know what
Yeah.
you're gonna get. It's right. It's like it's a toss up.
Yeah.
How busy I am, but
There you go.
dude, amazing. So yeah, let's start there. How crazy it is now to see where like Austin is as a Bitcoin capital of the world. At least in my opinion, I think it is.
I agree. You know, I think there's a lot of technical Bitcoin talent here. There's founders, there's Bitcoin core contributors, individual contributors to various like remote Bitcoin startups as well. You know, a lot of stranded energy, a lot of mining activity here in Texas. I think if Texas was a country, it would be like top 5 for hash rate on the network. So Texas is in pole place right now.
And Zach, like just you coming from, like you just described, you coming from college and then seeing it here and growing up here, like what does it mean for you just to be working at Trammell, like one of the biggest VC firms in Austin, and then learning from guys like Christopher and you know all those OGs? Like what's that like, dude?
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, it was a dream setup for me. My kind of story is, you know, I grew up here in Austin. I went to UCLA. I was studying business economics and entrepreneurship. In my econ classes, you know, we were learning this very Keynesian kind of framework on economics, like modern monetary theory, and it was all very sort of central planning oriented, and felt like something was missing, you know, in that whole process. And so I kind of rejected that those theories that I learned in college, but in hindsight was really helpful to understand how kind of the conventional, you know, state of economics thinks about monetary policy and that sort of thing. At the same time, I was getting really excited about the startup world. I fell in love with the startup world, in particular fintech. And I was like, oh, it's great that these fintech startups are abstracting away from what is a really clunky, dated monetary system, and you know, making it easy for people to send and receive payments, interact with the global financial system, stuff like that. So when I found Bitcoin about halfway through college, it ticked a couple big boxes for me. The first was, you know, the Austrian School of Economic Thought that's kind of baked into the design of Bitcoin. That really appealed to me, and you know, led me down the kind of Austrian econ rabbit hole. And then on the tech startup side, it's like, oh my gosh, Bitcoin is really a step function improvement in that base monetary layer itself. So the abstractions away from this are going to be, you know, pretty amazing. There's going to be a lot of really big, important businesses that come out of it. So kind of in going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, I also was exploring Lightning and the kind of startup ecosystem that was emerging on top of it, on top of the Bitcoin stack. And I knew of TVP. I thought their portfolio had, you know, a lot of my favorite companies in it. And I can kind of tell you the whole story about
go for it.
what TVP is, but I knew about the backstory, and so I kind of seeked them out, eventually meeting one of them at an Austin BitDevs event in 2021, and pretty much just pounded the table for the rest of my college career. You know, you guys got to bring me on, give me a chance, let me prove myself. And eventually they relented, they did, and that was an internship right out of college, and that was a few years ago. So I've been an analyst full time for a little over 2.5 years. It's amazing. It's everything I hoped it would be. It's so gratifying to be, you know, contributing to Bitcoin, talking with really, really smart people, a lot smarter than me, learning from them. And yeah, it's amazing.
So one of the things that you created this year, or were a part of this year, was this emerging Bitcoin native venture capital landscape. Can you tell us about this, Zach? Just like a kind of a high overview.
Sure. Yeah, so, you know, TVP is in a pretty privileged position where we see really all of the Bitcoin native startup deals out there, you know, all of the kind of venture backable early stage deals. And we knew just anecdotally that it was growing rapidly, and it has been over the last few years. But I think the market in general didn't quite appreciate that. You know, a lot of the activity was very early stage, it was pre-seed, seed stage. And so we felt it was kind of our, given our unique position, we should put out the summary data and sort of educate the market on what's happening. And we initially did that in 2023. The data goes back to 2021. So now we have 4 years of data, and we track things like the year-over-year growth in deal count, dollars invested into the space, you know, average round size and valuation across startup stages. And you know, the data kind of speaks for itself. In the last 3 years, the year-over-year growth in deal count, the number of deals getting done, was 60% year-over-year growth, 70% year-over-year growth, and then another 30% year-over-year growth on top of that. And those first 2 years, if you guys remember, 22, 23, you know, these were major down years in the spot price of Bitcoin. So it's actually not correlated to the spot price like a lot of people kind of outside the industry might think. There's really a technology story here. It's really the kind of expanding composability of the Bitcoin stack that's driving more startup activity.
So that's getting passed around right now, but they can go to the Trammell website and download that, right? As a PDF.
Yep, you can download it for free on the website.
How long did it take you to do that, dude? Was it like a while?
I'll tell you what, the kind of like data tracking, that's just an ongoing thing. As we see deals, we'll, you know, make sure that we put them into our database. But putting the kind of insights together, working with our design agency to make it look nice. And then for me, you know, TVP really is a startup, so we kind of all wear a lot of hats, right? You know, so I'm not just on the investing side, but marketing, operations, capital formation. So it fell on me originally when I was an intern to do all the marketing for it, to reach out to journalists. And I was trying so hard to get, you know, these kind of like TradFi journalists to cover our research early on. And finally, this past year, I was able to get some folks like CNBC to talk about it, to get the word out. But yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's important, and it's, I think, kind of like something we can offer to the Bitcoin startup world as a whole. Other Bitcoin venture firms, when they raise capital, they can say, look, this is a massive breakout category. You know, this isn't just a small kind of subset of crypto. It's actually rapidly growing as a share of crypto.
Yeah, and it's not like you could just grab it from like PitchBook or something, right? Like you have to be in the ecosystem to understand it.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of these rounds, especially pre-seed, don't really get announced publicly. Maybe I should probably touch on that. You know, one of the cool insights from our last research report, in my opinion, was the year-over-year growth in pre-seed activity was 760%. So massive, massive growth at the very earliest stage of startup activity. You know, there's always kind of a drop-off rate in you know, the number of companies that graduate from pre-seed to end up raising a seed round and then Series A and beyond. But that's kind of in my opinion, it's a great early insight on what's to come. There's a lot of activity at the earliest stage. There will be some drop off, but more will come at the seed stage, and so on and so forth.
Because, yeah, like, talk about that, Zach. Like, I don't know if you have the number for it, but like, what's the percentage for like these pre-seed Bitcoin companies, or just like Web 5, Web 3, whatever, like getting to a seed stage? Is it as good as the regular technology space, or is it, yeah, what is the batting average on that? Do you know?
I don't have it off the top of my head. You know, that there is a very, very high failure rate in the startup world in
Just in
general,
general,
70, 80%. You know, within the Bitcoin native space, I would say if you're building on a platform that ends up not being or I guess let's zoom this out to all of crypto. If you're building on a platform that ends up not being around in 5 years or 10 years, that failure rate is going to be a lot higher unless you pivot. This is kind of a foundational view for TVP. You know, we have this long-term history with Bitcoin. Our namesake, Dustin Trammell, was really the first person to download Bitcoin Core after the software was released in January 2009. He was a cypherpunk. He worked in the kind of early internet age, and
Did he share like a message with Satoshi or something?
he did. He shared messages. He submitted a bug fix to Satoshi. Satoshi sent him some Bitcoin as a bug bounty, which was literally worthless at the time. Nobody had put a price on Bitcoin at that point. But yeah, so this crazy OG history. You know, when the block size wars happened in like the 2014 to 2017 period, you know, there was this debate about how do we scale blockchains. Some people wanted to move fast and break things like you do in the startup world using blockchains. They wanted to iterate rapidly with the core protocol. But, you know, for Bitcoin, the approach that Christopher and Dustin and kind of the Bitcoin community in general took was, this is our chance at having a base money for the internet. You know, we can't make rapid changes and potentially introduce security vulnerabilities that might mean the end of Bitcoin, the end of, you know, the internet's base money. So go and build another smart contract platform, go experiment, go move fast, break things elsewhere. And in due course, you know, we'll be paying attention and we'll figure out the right way to reappropriate that and bring those large validated markets back home to the Bitcoin stack where they'll live in the long term. And so, you know, when talking to founders in that period, the conversations would kind of be around, you know, I have this thing that I really want to build using crypto, using a blockchain. Given that I can't do it on Bitcoin, what do you think is the next best platform for me to go and build on? And really inherent in those conversations is this idea of platform risk. You know, they know that Bitcoin is the most secure, decentralized, robust foundation. They're not building on it because they can. They have an idea of what they want to build, and they can only do it on Ethereum or somewhere else. And really over the last few years, those conversations are no longer having to happen. Because now these markets that were previously only possible on Bitcoin, or on everywhere else in crypto, are kind of unlocking one by one on Bitcoin. When given the choice, we've seen that entrepreneurs, you know, will build on Bitcoin 10 times out of 10.
Interesting. So would you say that you're seeing more founders building on these kind of other, what you would call them, like L2s than ever before? Like, or are you seeing just still, yeah. So I guess kind of going back to 2015, 2016, 2017, like, does it feel like the same thing is happening again just on Bitcoin now? Or is it more different?
There's been a lot of creative destruction in the broader crypto world around things like people you know, talk about decentralized finance, which it's kind of ironic because you can't really have decentralized finance on a centralized platform. So I think the opportunity is to have decentralized finance for the first time ever, truly on the Bitcoin stack. You know, the only real decentralized layer one. But certainly, you know, all of that is kind of quickly becoming possible on the Bitcoin stack. And so I would say, you know, around the layer 2 question, it's not really about one versus the other. It's kind of the culmination of all of them because they're all really interoperable because of Lightning. Lightning plugs into various side chains and layer 2s that have recently launched or are kind of coming soon. And so the composability, the design space of this overall kind of Bitcoin stack is rapidly expanding. So it's not really an either or. It's just kind of everything together is growing rapidly. And so that's where the kind of entrepreneurs are coming from elsewhere in crypto to say, now I can do this on Bitcoin. I'm not going back.
Right. No, that makes a ton of sense. So let's talk about TVP and kind of like what y'all have invested in the past, I guess, 4 years, or I guess since you've been in there. Anything that kind of sticks out, or anything that you're kind of, maybe a founder said, oh, I'm going to go this way, and you're like, oh, and then it turned out being right, or give us some more stories.
Well, I would say, we are well aware at TVP of like the kind of typical dynamic between a VC and a founder, and we try very hard to remain disciplined on not ever kind of like giving advice or direction when we're not coming from a place of domain expertise and experience, because oftentimes in the startup world, what to an investor might seem like brainstorming, just trying to like add value, might end up giving the founder a wrong direction, and the founder might think that means, this investor will invest if I do this. That ends up leading to, potentially some poor decision making, kind of like some misalignment between what the investor was thinking and the founder was thinking. It's just, we try to stay away from just giving advice, just kind of like from the hip. But I'm happy to talk about some portfolio examples if that'd be helpful.
Yeah.
I think
That's a really interesting point, though, because you kind of hear the opposite with other venture capitalists, where they will shoot from the hip and give you some advice, and turns out it's not the best advice.
Yeah.
So that's refreshing to hear.
I think. Well, thank you. I think there's been, in the last like 10 or so years, a massive increase in the number of VC firms, and they're competing for deals. And I think one dimension they try to compete on is adding value, right? Being helpful to founders, and especially when you're an inexperienced venture capitalist, if you don't have the scar tissue, you don't have the years of experience, and or even like a company or business model specific experience, you might, the founder probably knows a lot more about the business and the market and the product than you do, so you might not be necessarily qualified to be giving advice. So that's a
great
company
stuff.
policy.
So let's talk about some of the TVP portfolio companies.
Sure. So I'm sure a lot of you guys in Austin know Unchained. They're down the street. We were seed investors out of our first fund in 2019. We've invested all the way through their last round, Series B, a couple years ago. One that I would highlight that I think doesn't get enough love is Zebedee. I'm sure some of you guys are familiar with Zebedee.
Yeah, Andre is pretty. Yeah.
Andre is awesome. I actually met him while I was still at UCLA, and he's one of the rare people who has immense talent, both technically and his presentation, his business acumen. Yeah. So Zebedee's sort of founding principle was that video games are an area where people are used to having a virtual currency, but it's normally quite siloed. You can't really do anything with it outside of the game. And for folks like mobile game developers, otherwise worthless virtual currency doesn't really do much for user engagement compared to real value. So by integrating, Bitcoin rewards using Lightning, you can now do, micropayments of, 10 sats, for example. Even if it's a very small monetary value, having a real monetary value in the rewards is crazy for mobile game engagement. So some of their customers have stats like, after integrating Zebedee, an 84% increase in average revenue per daily active user. After integrating Zebedee, 1,300% increase in 30-day retention. Stats like this. I don't think I can share their revenue numbers, but they've grown quite a bit over the last 2 years. They're certainly a real big business now, and they've done so a bit more quietly than.
They don't really beat their chest. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. They have a lot of their customers are game developers, right? So maybe not the average kind of Bitcoiner, but yeah, they're doing some really great stuff, and certainly lots more to come.
That's amazing. Let's kind of walk through kind of like when you look at a deck Let's go there. What do you scan for? What earns you a deeper dive into it? And is there like any underrated kind of metric that you're looking for, especially like in the pre-seed or seed stage?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, the kind of first step for us is our investment mandate is focused on Bitcoin native companies. So what we mean by Bitcoin native is the company's building on Bitcoin, and it was founded with kind of the principle that Bitcoin is the kind of global money for the internet. And the success of a Bitcoin native company drives value back to the Bitcoin stack via more demand for the asset, more users, more transactions. So something that's not Bitcoin native is something that says, hey, we're Bitcoin native, but then really when you look under the hood, a lot of the activity is happening on Ethereum or on another platform, which there's actually, you may be surprised, there's quite a few companies that call themselves Bitcoin native. Really, when you kind of peel back the layers, they're not. So that's step one, is this actually a Bitcoin native business? Something that we think is really important at kind of the early stages especially is kind of rigorous hypothesis testing for founders. You know, when you take the jump and become an entrepreneur, focus on you're focused on a specific problem that you want to solve. Some folks have great intuition on where massive markets can develop and where real problems are, but it's really important to validate that your hypothesis about the problem that you're going after and the solution that you're building to try to solve it is what the market actually wants. So talking to potential customers, doing research on competitive landscape, on the market, on if your product would be valued, that's really, really, really important.
So do y'all look for anything like a business plan or, you know, like recurring revenue or anything like that as far as a tipping point?
So it really depends on the stage of the business. So pre-seed is typically as early as, you know, 2 guys and an idea and maybe an MVP. Seed stage is typically you have a product, you have some traction. You're not quite at the point where you can really just sort of build a scalable sales organization and just pour fuel on the fire, but you're almost there. If you kind of look around the corner, you can see that. And that is really Series A, when you have kind of line of sight on, we can build a repeatable sales process and really just scale revenues. So for something like a pre-seed business, you know, existing revenue is definitely not a requirement for us. But if you're looking at Series A, you know, the kind of market norms are certainly such that, you know, around Series A, companies typically have 1 to 2 million in revenue and that sort of thing.
So I did notice that you guys had Founders Fund inside of that TVP presentation and Ribbit. And can you talk a little bit about how y'all help companies get to that next level when it comes to getting past seed stage?
Yeah. So some of these kind of iconic venture firms have started investing in Bitcoin native companies. You know, typically, maybe not necessarily just Bitcoin, but in broader crypto, you tend to see the biggest names kind of come in towards the top of a bull market, towards kind of the frothy periods. But it's our hypothesis, at least, that, you know, Bitcoin native as a sector is going to continue to grow rapidly, and all of these generalist firms are going to catch up. You know, this is one of the biggest technology kind of platform shifts of our lifetime. And so, you know, eventually these folks, there are a lot of really smart folks there at these firms, and they're going to understand what the opportunity set is. So our kind of long-term goal for TVP is really to be a bridge to, you know, these iconic venture firms at the later stages. So if TVP is investing in the seed round or leading the Series A round, that should be, you know, a signal that these groups, the Excel, Bessemer, Benchmarks of the world, should be paying attention. And so, you know, building our network with folks that we've co-invested with, or who are taking a look at our portfolio, that's certainly a big focus for us. So some of our co-investors are groups like Valor Equity Partners, Craft Ventures, which is David Sachs' venture firm, Google Ventures, and a few others.
Nice. I want to talk about the fact that you guys have, you know, like some really interesting, you know, port coasts like Wave Lake. Can you talk about like what was it specifically about that company that you guys liked.
About Wavelake?
Yeah.
Yeah. Great merch. No,
Definitely, yeah, great merch.
they do have great merch, but that wasn't what brought us to the
I got
investment. Yeah, I mean the music industry is kind of from the outside. It really seems like it's not in a healthy place for artists specifically. You know, Sam Means and Michael Ree really experienced the problem firsthand as musicians. Sam's actually won some Grammys as a producer. He also had a prior company called Hello Merch that handled a lot of the merch for smaller musicians, indie bands. It's a great network in the music industry, and they saw firsthand how difficult it is for artists to kind of make a living. You know, you have to have millions of plays in order to actually focus on music full time. You have to be making a lot of money on merch and touring and that sort of thing. You really can't appeal to a very niche audience, have 1,000 or 10,000 really diehard fans and make a living 100% as an artist, because you know a lot of the money is flowing to record labels and distributors and that sort of thing. So with Wavelake, they really built kind of an RSS feed for music using Noster on the back end with Lightning payments kind of built in natively. So you can do things like send direct Bitcoin payments to an artist as sort of like a like or a tip or a thank you, or as a way to sort of rank your comment to the top of the list. There's a lot of interesting things you could do with that paradigm. And Wavelake, the platform they built is one interface on what is kind of the bigger innovation, which is their underlying infrastructure that they built that anyone else can actually plug into as well. And that kind of creates this open competition for music players and that sort of thing. So it's a really big, bold mission. We backed them at the very earliest stage, and certainly, big cheerleaders for them along the way.
It's a really cool company. Every time I see them, I'm just like, it's so cool.
Yeah.
I just had that more question for myself.
It was really kind of inspiring to see. I don't know if you followed the story of Ansley Costello a couple of years ago. Yeah,
I was talking to her a few times. Yeah.
She's great. She had dozens of songs, maybe more, across all of the classic platforms, and made like $200 or something like that. And then after a couple weeks on Wavelake, she sort of went viral, and people started boosting her and sending her sats. And she very quickly made more in 2 weeks on Wavelake than she made in 5 years with hundreds of songs or dozens of songs across all the other platforms. And believe it or not, of course, became a really big cheerleader for Wavelake, for Bitcoin. She really saw the power of kind of that new paradigm. So that was inspiring to see. Hopefully, a lot more cases to come.
Yeah, absolutely. I had another question, just more about the AI stuff that we're seeing here in Austin, because it's definitely taken off. How is TBP looking at as far as like the AI and Bitcoin intersection, and is there anything that you could share that what you guys found?
For sure, this is kind of a hot topic right now, that there's some kind of interplay between Bitcoin and the rise of AI agents, foundational models. We actually invested in AI companies prior to our dedicated Bitcoin native mandate. We started that dedicated mandate with I think it was the first fund series focused on Bitcoin native companies in 2021. We've been investing since 2014 in the startup world. We've had even some exits across AI companies. And we really, the pre-Bitcoin investment focus was areas that we thought would be converging with Bitcoin kind of in the longer term. So we had some applied AI companies. It's actually a great segue to talk about our latest portfolio company. I don't know if you saw, we announced last week. You guys may know Lyle Pratt. He's a builder here in Austin, founder of Vita. We led the Series A that got announced last week. Vita is actually building what they call the AI operating system for businesses, the AI agent operating system for businesses, focused on all sorts of business communications. So voice, SMS, email, chatbot, you name it. Plugs right into existing telco standards.
He has experience in that, doesn't he?
That's right. Yeah. It's actually a really amazing team. There's 3 co-founders, and in different combinations of 2 out of the 3, they have built and sold companies together. And so one of the co-founders, Noah Hayes, was Lyle's college roommate. They built a startup in college. That was actually more in kind of the gaming industry. Lyle ended up building a great company in the telecom industry. It got acquired by a public company at the time called Telequint, and he met the other co-founder, Brandon Robinson, at Telequint. Brandon's company also got acquired by Telequint, and they ended up launching really, really big, successful products for Telequint. They got taken private, taken public again, very experienced operators. And you may be wondering kind of what is the Bitcoin angle here, right? It's got to be a Bitcoin native company. So first off, all three co-founders are Bitcoiners. One of the founding principles of the business was, in this future where AI agents are playing a big role in how businesses communicate with each other and with their customers, a credit card or a bank account, these are just kind of incongruent with the speed that AI agents operate on. They're all going to be using Lightning Network rails. So they built all their AI agents from inception to speak Bitcoin, speak Lightning. If there are other assets floating around on the Lightning Network via Taproot assets, they'll be ready for that. So they're serving a lot of customers today who don't know anything about Bitcoin, don't care about Bitcoin, but when the market's ready, they'll be able to turn that on and we think win a lot of business from it.
That's interesting. So it sounds like there's definitely stuff that you guys are looking at as far as AI, but it's more on the infra stuff. I would imagine more on like the lightning side of things. It sounds like.
So for AI agents who are operating on a sub-millisecond speed, even a few seconds is kind of an eternity, let alone 3 to 5 business days to do an ACH transaction. And so a bearer asset like Bitcoin over instant settlement rails with really, really low cost like Lightning really seems like the kind of perfectly suited asset and transaction method for AI agents.
Cool.
So that's a big theme. I mean, like I said, we talk to each and every Bitcoin native startup founder, so we're not necessarily going into the AI space separately from Bitcoin. It's always from a Bitcoin native framework.
Interesting. Is there any? What do you think about all these kind of AI data centers? Or some of them being Bitcoin mining hub, Bitcoin mining infrastructure plays. Like, what do you kind of see there? Is that a real thing happening, or is it like not so much a thing?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm no expert on AI data center operations, but there's a lot of kind of debate, talk right now about whether or not that we're overbuilding. These foundational model companies are spending like crazy, talking about to the order of trillions of dollars in data centers. If there is an overbuild, a lot of kind of abundant data centers with lots of compute available, that seems well suited to be turned into a Bitcoin mining facility until the AI demand picks back up. So I'm not super deep in the weeds in that world, but definitely interesting to watch. I think the interplay between Bitcoin, the grid, and AI HPC has been pretty fascinating over the last 5 or so years.
Yeah. Cool. I kind of want to open up to everybody else, but do you have anything else you want to touch on before we move on to questions from the audience?
Yeah, I think just some general advice for founders that we do like to give, and definitely seen from my experiences, when thinking about things like round size and terms, valuation, a lot of founders kind of early on in their company's journey sort of get hung up on like a vanity metric valuation at like a pre-seed or a seed stage. Whereas if someone were to acquire the business at that moment, let's say you raise a pre-seed at a 10 million post-money valuation, they're not going to pay 10 million for the business. There's no revenues, So that valuation, it's not arrived at because that's kind of necessarily like the true underlying value of the business, but it's more so about the amount of dilution that you're willing to give up and the amount of money you need to kind of validate your hypotheses, kind of hit some milestones and get you ready for the next venture round. So, when thinking about terms for a round, really I would suggest you think about how much money do I need for a certain amount of runway to validate this hypothesis, and how much of my company do I want to sell, and bring on the right partner in the process. So yeah, that's kind of a useful framework that I would suggest.
Great advice. All right, we're going to open up to the room. Anybody have any questions? Yeah. Go.
Why would people claim that they're Bitcoin native if they're not actually using Bitcoin? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, it's a great question.
Thank you.
I think Bitcoin, it may not seem so as a Bitcoiner when you try to convince your friends and family about Bitcoin, and they say they think you're crazy, right? But Bitcoin actually has a really strong brand, and it sort of has this halo effect on it. You know, people know there's something there with Bitcoin. It's a multi-trillion-dollar asset, right? They hear be your own bank. They hear about decentralized finance, things like this. I feel that groups will try to kind of like grasp on to that halo or kind of ride the enthusiasm and the wave of Bitcoin, what's really happening, this kind of platform shift that is Bitcoin, and say, hey, we're doing that too, to try to get attention, but in practice, they're actually using another platform, or maybe they're funneling money to their token, which is really, you know, just a way for them to stack some more Bitcoin.
So do you get embarrassed like when you find out, or like how does that work?
Oh, we don't take the approach to go and try to, you know, accuse them of anything. It's just we kind of bow out of the conversation and we just let them know it's not a fit for us.
Cool. Any other? Oh, Ben.
Yeah, what are some common like founder characteristics that really stick out as like failure?
Yeah, you know, I think a common, it's a great, I love that question. A common,
Not showing up to
kind
the
of,
meeting.
yeah, that's a bad sign for sure. Well, a common kind of misstep that founders make in the startup world, Bitcoin is no exception, is taking this approach of, I have this idea, it's genius, the market's gonna love it, I'm just gonna pour a bunch of engineering resources into it, and then once I build it, the market will come and everyone's gonna love it and it's gonna be a hit. And in some cases, you see founders pour years and millions of dollars into, you know, building their pristine product without doing any testing along the way to sort of validate their hypotheses, coming back to that idea. So having that framework of I think this is true, but I need to validate it, let's get empirical about it and test with the market, is really, really important, because that is, you see hundreds of companies kind of fall by the wayside because of that. And once you do it, if the people don't come once you built it, then you know, you promise your investors, you promise your employees that they will. That's a bad look and can be difficult to recover from.
Great question. Keon.
How does TVP feel about founders with preferred shares?
Founders with preferred shares.
You guys have a position on it? Or?
You know,
Well, explain what a preferred share is, if you don't mind, Zach, because maybe the room doesn't know.
So your framework for thinking about company equity could be, you know, could come from your experience investing in public equities and think, I buy one Apple stock, that equals other Apple stock. Especially for private companies, it's typical to have multiple classes of shares, each with different kind of rights. These can be, you know, preferred shares will have first claim on the company's assets if it gets, you know, if it goes to Chapter 11 or if it gets sold, and also in venture rounds, especially later rounds, it's common for there to be additional kind of rights given to preferred shareholders. Something this brings up that I figure I'd share is when early rounds get really cute with a lot of different terms that are especially beneficial for early investors that are kind of very far from what the market terms are. You can look up the, you know, typical term sheets, like a typical seed term sheet. I think YC has a good site with some helpful resources there. That ends up being a big red flag for future investors. If they're like, wait a minute, there's a lot of weird terms in here. What are the early investors kind of thinking? And we might need to come in and clean this up if we feel really strongly about the company. So I think that's probably more of a question for TVP partners on the founder preferred side, but yeah, I think if I were to offer any advice, we'd keep things pretty simple, standard, especially the earliest stages, just to not introduce any unneeded complexity.
Great. Christopher.
Curious how you guys think about exits when you're evaluating a potential portco. Like, do you need to visualize a path to an acquisition, going public? How do you think about all that?
Yeah, good question. I think it'd also be helpful just to zoom out and talk about venture capital incentives in general. A lot of companies, most companies in fact, are not really a fit for venture capital investment. VCs are kind of a unique type of investor where they're getting paid by their investors to build a portfolio of really high risk, high potential return assets. And so, if your vision for your company is not to be, multi-$100 million type of business, it may not be a fit for venture capital. And VCs typically have a life of their individual funds of like 10 years or so. So that's about the time horizon that they're thinking. At the earliest stages, you typically see set 5 to 7 years from like a seed round or a Series A to exit. That's typical, but those timelines are actually getting pushed out farther and farther right now in kind of the state we're in right now with kind of the M&A environment, the IPO environment. So this has actually caused quite a big liquidity problem for the entire venture capital sector because VC investors are not getting returns from their VCs to then recycle into new venture funds, new managers. So there's actually a major kind of dearth of liquidity right now. Part of that is because of the FTC and the previous chairperson there and the posture they took towards acquisitions. Part of it is compliance requirements for public markets. There's a big kind of macro story there. Prior to the dot-com bubble, the standard for venture capital was actually, the top VCs were underwriting a Series A with 3 years or less to IPO if everything went right. Now that sounds crazy, right? Kraken, for example, we participated in the Series A in 2014. They're still not a public company, right? So I think exits are definitely something that venture investors are thinking about, but they're thinking on that 10-ish year time horizon.
Do you think that'll extend even further now? Like if these new venture capitalists get spun up, do you think they'll have to push back 15, 20 years? Just because of everything seems to be moving that way. Everybody's keeping their company private, even Elon's doing it, right?
I certainly hope not.
What are the ramifications of that, I guess?
Yeah, I think it's actually a really unhealthy kind of paradigm for capital markets. As an individual, like retail investor, you can't get exposure to the best companies, right? Because they're not going public until maybe they're at 10 billion in market cap or over $1 billion in revenue, and maybe these large crossover funds have hoovered up a lot of the value and all of the growth. And then once the growth has subsided, they decide to sort of dump on retail by taking the company public and selling their shares then. Whereas something like prior to the dot-com bubble, like I explained, these companies are very early stage and have lots of growth ahead of them that the retail investor gets to participate in. Like I think Amazon was, $5 a share or something at kind of the dot-com bubble lows, or I guess the post-dot-com bubble lows. You just don't really see. That was pre-split, yeah, exactly. So what was it, a 10-to-1 split? I forget. So
I think it's 1 to 20.
Yeah, there you go. And those stories just don't really exist in kind of public markets right now. So certainly something that we are hoping to play a role in kind of restoring to the long-term norms. Hopefully more to come on that front. But it's certainly a problem and something we think about a lot. It's actually an existential risk for venture as a whole. So I think early stage VCs should really be thinking about kind of rolling up their sleeves and trailblazing a little bit, taking companies public earlier than is typical today.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Do
Interesting.
you think that Texas Stock Exchange might play any role in that?
As a native Texan, I certainly hope so. I think that's yeah, I'm actually speculating here. I'd imagine that's one of the founding principles of the Texas Stock Exchange, because existing exchange requirements like NASDAQ, New York Stock Exchange, are not necessarily catered towards early stage, high growth companies. And there's also a lot of kind of compliance requirements and stuff like that. So I hope it can play a role. I know some of the folks at the Texas Blockchain Council are involved, and we certainly would love to bring more companies to Texas and the Texas Stock Exchange.
That would be really interesting. Yeah, go for it.
Do you guys encourage or require holding Bitcoin on the balance sheet for these newer companies?
Yeah, so this is an interesting question for sure. That sort of framework that I was offering earlier about how to think about round size, it's you want to have some kind of constraints as a founder to keep you disciplined, right? And if a founder approached me and said, I'm raising $1 million, I need 250K over the next 2 years, and then I want 750K to put into Bitcoin. Like the question I would ask myself is, well, why do you need $1 million? It sounds like you need 250K. So our investors aren't paying us to buy Bitcoin for startups, right? And if your ideas don't work out, the hypotheses get invalidated, you might end up just looking like a Bitcoin holding company, which is not kind of what we're all here for, right? So
that's interesting. Yeah, but you hear other venture capitalists in the ecosystem say different. So it's interesting to hear that.
What I would say is, I think for like a high growth, high margin business, Bitcoin as kind of a treasury asset is extremely powerful. If you look at a public company putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet, previously to return capital to shareholders, you had two options: share buybacks and dividends, right? Both of those kind of have their own flaws, but if you divert, some portion of free cash flow to accumulating Bitcoin, what you're doing is sort of levering your existing free cash flows if you're able to hold it for 5 or more years, and the increase in enterprise value that you get from the Bitcoin is a new way to return capital to shareholders. So I think it's extremely powerful, but where I was kind of focusing, my answer was more around kind of the very earliest stages of a startup, where you're really thinking about building product, finding product market fit, and that sort of thing. Yeah, exactly. Whereas just accumulating a big Bitcoin treasury just for the sake of it might end up becoming a bit of a distraction.
Hindrance.
That as well.
Yeah. Go for it.
If I'm a crypto dev and I'm interested in building like a stable coin or tokenizing a real world asset or some kind of innovation at the frontier of crypto right now, what's the argument for doing it on the Bitcoin stack and not on Solana or ETH or some other?
Yeah, great question. What I hear the most from founders, and it feels like every week I meet someone who comes from somewhere else in crypto and says, they tell me their story. I've been in the Ethereum world for however many years, and once I saw that I could build this on Bitcoin because of this L2 or because of this, because of the Taproot upgrade or whatever it was, I realized that this is where I'm building. This is where the opportunity is. Really comes back to that idea of platform risk. If you're an entrepreneur, you're going to be pouring 10 plus years of your life into a business, blood, sweat, and tears, no guarantee that it's going to work, taking on all sorts of risks. There's a high opportunity cost that you're kind of foregoing with your existing career. If you don't have to, you're not going to take the risk of the platform that you're building on shutting down or introducing changes to how it functions that all of a sudden might bring new risk to your business. If you don't have to, you won't take those risks because they're additional risks that might mean the failure of your business, right? So there's a real entrepreneurial gravitation towards building on the most secure, the most robust, and the most decentralized platform, which is obviously Bitcoin.
Great answer. Go for it.
So for any of your guys' companies, are they worried about the whole NOx versus core op return size debate because you're building on Bitcoin, or is that not a concern?
I haven't heard any concern on it from our founders. I think
that's more like backroom type of developer talk.
Yeah, you know, I think it's in kind of an open, it's a free market kind of question. Folks who want to run one version of Bitcoin Core can run that. Folks who want to run another can run that. And at least so far, that debate is not, you know, resulting in any meaningful change in kind of like the market size for certain Bitcoin applications, that sort of thing. I should also mention we have a company policy at TVP not to ever weigh in or back certain changes to Bitcoin Core.
Interesting.
We don't want to be influencing the direction of Bitcoin Core. That's certainly not where our edge is. That's not where our expertise is. So it's important for us to know where the market's going, but not do anything to influence it or pick a side.
Yeah, because potentially you guys could move a whole ecosystem in town, potentially. I mean, yeah, that makes
Maybe
sense.
so, or even to be seen
Yeah.
as doing that is not good.
Sam?
Okay, great. So since you don't support like super PAC psyops for core versus knots, but you, the second part you said was you know, understanding momentum or price projection. To put it smartly, how would you prefer a company like Kraken IPO in a liquidity market like you have for the next 3 months, or would you prefer they wait approximately 4 years?
You know, I
don't answer that.
I can't really comment on that. I as an investor have a fiduciary responsibility to my LPs and, you know, want to maximize returns for them.
Do you think it'd be max return? Should we go now?
He's just
or-
making a joke. Austin, go ahead, Austin. Save us.
I had an initial question about Bitcoin dominance versus crypto, and like comparing versus investments. But that was literally like the first slide in your deck. So you kind of answered it. But now I want to know why. Why do you think? Why is Bitcoin at 60% dominance, which is like, this is where people are putting their money at in one sense, or a lot of people, versus where people are investing, where like what 2, 3, 4% dominance versus all the crypto investments. And for me, where I experience this is I work at Voltage and we do Bitcoin infrastructure. I talk to the biggest fintech and crypto companies, talking to them about Bitcoin infrastructure, and it's hard to get prioritization for Bitcoin. And for me, I'm like, this should be obvious. You all are a crypto native company. You should have kick-ass Bitcoin infrastructure, be at the cutting edge of that, but it's an argument always to prioritize Bitcoin over crypto in this one area, but in this other area, the main area that matters, Bitcoin is dominating. So how do you make sense of this paradox? Do you see this?
Sure. Yeah. Well, the Bitcoin dominance, it gets back to the idea of Bitcoin's halo. Bitcoin is clearly, you know, the most used, the most adopted asset. It's kind of the whole point of all this, right? But the kind of startup opportunity on Bitcoin is much younger than startup opportunity on crypto. Really, Bitcoin native as a category has only been possible in kind of a dedicated fashion for the last 5 or so years. It was really, you know, SegWit was a technical prerequisite to the Lightning Network. That brought, you know, all sorts of newfound business opportunity, like Voltage, for example. And then, you know, the Taproot upgrade in 2021, we're still seeing kind of newfound composability, newfound opportunity as a result of that. One of which is Taproot Assets Protocol on Lightning Network. If it'll ever come, if Tether will ever issue on the Lightning Network, that ought to be a pretty massive kind of shift. You know, they have trillions in volume on platforms like Tron, Ethereum.
And they're just leaving them there until they move over. Yeah.
Paolo actually said in Vegas that the Lightning Network, he called it out, you know, being not being kind of a global consensus network, not having a global state, not being a blockchain, it's actually perfectly suited to inherit the kind of stablecoin-like payment opportunity from platforms like Tron. You know, when you follow the kind of stablecoin flows over time, they go from one platform to the next cheapest, but they're all blockchains, they all have a fixed block size. They're not really meant to handle those types of payments. They're not meant to handle hundreds of millions of payments and, you know, trillions in volume. but you know, a network like Lightning sure seems well suited to. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. It's really a lot earlier. There's a lot more kind of building to be done. I think about it like sort of an unraveling opportunity set as this platform that is, you know, Bitcoin gets built out, as infrastructure pieces, like, you know, as voltage gets put in place that allows companies to deploy and scale applications on Lightning, interface with the network much cheaper, much easier. That might allow new consumer-facing apps, you know, later kind of down the line. So as these pieces get put in place, there are new pockets of opportunity that emerge as a result.
Yeah, I never thought of it like it's just starting at 21 or 20, and then it's kind of going this way. Never thought of it like
100%.
that. But yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, if you think about some of the kind of Bitcoin scaling platforms, side chains, layer twos that are out today, 5 years ago, maybe none of them existed, except Liquid might have been around at that point. I think the Bitcoin stack, as it will kind of solidify in 10, 20 years, it's going to look way different than it looks today. It's still quite early in the build-up.
So you're actually going to think that there are actually be more Bitcoin native companies here in the next 5, 7, 10 years?
Absolutely. This is a you know,
where's this
massive
blog post stack?
I think it comes down to our research. If you look at the data, you can see, you know, kind of the massive kind of breakout story in Bitcoin.
It's the coolest thing I've heard all month.
Oh, the startup activity is going to continue to grow, 100%. Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind about it.
Cool. Jack, go for it.
Yeah, you touched on Wavelake. I'm curious if you have any other thoughts on like Nostr applications that you're interested in, like the primals and Thomases of the world, and then other Nostr use cases that are more niche or haven't really cracked the surface yet.
Yeah, you know, when I was an intern, sort of like a capstone project that I did at TVP was just a real deep dive on Nostr, who was building, what is kind of uniquely enabled by it. And you know, at the time, a lot of the interest was around sort of like the Twitter clone, kind of like open, you know, Twitter client. You can have competition on the UX side, on the algorithms and stuff like that. I think where Nostr has proven to be most useful so far is really as kind of this open distribution network that groups like Wavelake have used, that anybody can plug into, anybody can interface with. It's very simple, it's very easy to build on. Something that came out of Nostr that I think is really powerful is the idea of the zap, you know, where you could send value in the form of, you know, sats over the Lightning Network as easy as, you know, hitting a like button, or just tapping a button, tapping send. That feels like something that is going to be around for a while, whether or not it's Nostr or another platform, another protocol. That kind of value expression, kind of in a similar way to how powerful Zebedee is with giving real monetary rewards to users, that just feels extremely powerful, extremely satisfying. If you've ever done it, you do a post and you see 100 sats come in. It's like, it's so engaging, it's so satisfying. It feels like that's something special that Bitcoin and Lightning uniquely enables, and it's not going to go away.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's all the questions that we have. Zach, thank you again for coming to Bitcoin Builders Club this month, and we really appreciate you.
Thanks for coming, guys, and thank you, Clark, for hosting.
Guys, feel free to hang out. We're going to shut everything down in like 30, 45 minutes.
It's like the half-dead startup that's sitting at 5%. Also the fact that half the volume is fake. No, even beyond that, there's additional frequency. The personal founders. I mean, you get a wallet exchange volume. Some of the wallets I got Black Eagle recently. Not exchange volume for exchanges. Like, you gotta think how much is like, imagine a world where more than half of all of the crypto volume. I might see more stuff to you guys. I'm just saying, imagine
Anything left, that'd be pretty crazy. I think everything started at 6. But I might just walk around 6 minutes.
Yeah, and then you're like, what's actually real? How would I know? How would I know what's real versus what
like background film?
Oh, God.
Stuff that you like, you splice into like.
Did you hear about how in they like flooded walks?
There's some different cool. Like, I mean, like
Had
there's
not
there's
only
all
fake
ecosystem in
volume,
Austin.
changes the
Like there's
volume.
people in Utah too, and Miami. Like I'm just interested like why Austin?
For me?
For like crypto.
This was
It is a spot.
peak of the debate.
It is a spot.
December.
I don't know if it's the spot. I mean, like New York, Miami, Austin.
I'm going to Miami.
Salt Lake City.
I remember
Miami
buying
is
$20
because like a bunch of the rich people, a bunch of the rich whales.
It's expensive to live.
$12.
And because it was Florida, like a bunch of the New
And
York.
at the time, I was like, what's going on?
Oh, there's gonna be I'll hit you up tomorrow. We'll see what your friends are. Yeah.
So Bitcoin Cash started in 2016. Peak of the debate, peak of everyone on it was in 2017. That's when I came. I saw your thing. We hit 10K in late November. Okay, so we were very close. Yeah, late November 2017, and then 20K like 2 weeks later. Where's she? Austin.
You guys come here.
Yeah, I guess so.
What do you guys do?
Startup founder. I'm a developer. I work in a company. I work in open source projects. He works on AI.
Startup? Yeah, how's it going? It's not hard work to fake that. So, I feel like it starts on zero, and then you got to structure it enough energy, and then hopefully get to chase someone, and then it's moving. Yeah. So I'm still on zero. So I keep giving it jolts, but it hasn't.
What do you do?
I'm a technical. How's it going? Ted.
Technical account manager? Is that like
I heard
implementation?
I think I overheard some of what you were talking about. Something very cool products. It's a facial or style.
Yeah. Learning basis.
So I have my own.
Okay, so you have this huge tech stack that you're helping them navigate. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah, do you know anything about Bitcoin? Yeah. It's a little bit of like the thing that's happening beneath the thing. Like the big thing that everyone's talking about is AI.
So basically, what they're part of my crazy thing about doing that is he's got to figure out so it's kind of wild, it's a game,
Like network.
yeah, Bitcoin is what it's Bitcoin. So people we're just trying all these different questions.
Yeah, I mean that's a lot of it because you have both a payment system. Okay, so we can do small payments, we can do business, but also we have a savings vehicle asset. Right.
And all these guys just start chatting with them and like phone conversations. And then it's like
Probably not, unless we're sending each other $1 billion. Maybe then, yeah. But the real, so like when so everyone sees AI as the biggest thing happening in the world right now, and tech. And like I agree AI has its my bet, of course this is my bet, but my bet is that Bitcoin is actually going to be a bigger impact than AI. It's like, how is that possible?
they were not.
Yeah, and it's like, what is AI going to do? AI is making
I thought that reaction might be
that is digital, it's making it for free. It's making it free, that's what AI is doing. So it's driving the price down of everything to zero. But Bitcoin represents this one thing. Like in 50 years, everything will be able to be spoofed and faked. except for Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin will be the one that
Yeah, you have some money. You're actually
not
pretty
only
good at it.
scarce, but verifiable.
I never.
Digital information that exists also it'll be residual value. So it's like Bitcoin will always contrast AI. AI is going to take over the world. I don't doubt that. But then Bitcoin will be a contrast of it to where you're like, okay, because AI is doing too much, I put my money in Bitcoin. Bitcoin's like a gold. Super extreme. It's the gold of digital space. But you can it's always going to be used. It's always going to hold value. Yeah, and if you look at those properties are literally the opposite of the properties of AI. The reason that we like AI is because it's not scarce. It makes everything free. AI is we're just trying to exactly. And it's gonna spread it quickly. So it's literally the inverse, which is why it's all the work. Sure. Well, I've been working on this is my argument because everyone's so bullish on AI, and I'm very forward on AI. I've been buying the last few weeks. Yeah, we've got 100K, so it's you just keep buying every week. That's the real strategy. Cash App. Yeah, you know the best Cash App is centralized. Cash App is centralized. You can buy it, you send it to your own wallet. You send it every $1,000.
Search and then
You guys know what you find by it?
I'm working on a social media filtering tool. Yeah, not a complete.
Yeah, I'm working on
It's filtering content. So it's reading the text of all the posts.
search about selling on Amazon.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that totally or I can modify the stuff like that. I think that right now it's kind of before you like kind of I'm a solo founder. There's a lot of bootstrap in, so I'm trying to make basically kind of like an income from that. I'm working on that.
Wow.
Bootstrapping is hard as well.
What is your book going to be called? Do you have a name?
So the thing about looking at ways we see before, we had a coffee table and I think we raised $10 out around the $20 million. It's like top 100 activities. We got a little bit more experiencing kind of coffee store and happening.
Like waiting room.
It was really cool that as the first employee, I was like, using that offering market space and trying to find found product market space. So it was like, I really needed it. Just to learn some strong actual doing products like software enterprise. And then not only doing that, I was also creating a pitch deck too. And the deck that I created told the story about how we're going to get solve problems.
Here's my free random idea. Top 21 Bitcoin places to visit and sell it for Bitcoin.
I was looking at hack out the tax systems.
Right, because
numbers like, I'm $100 million market.
What's so crazy right now?
It's like, you know what? We are in one.
I don't know. You got to do the research. You got to do the research. But here's one of the things that's crazy. You should look into Steak and Shake. Have you heard of Steak and Shake? They're fast food. Not really a fast food. Kind of like like a Chipotle type place in the U.S. They've been around for 41 years. Look at what Steak and Shake has done for the last year. Because they picked up Bitcoin strategy and they marketed it.
Obviously, 90% of those
They have grown like crazy. They've dominated the competition. Right, but they're a big company. You're an individual. If you can just get tiny part of the Bitcoin market and offer them